Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's security session. In this episode, we will be talking about Azure B2C. So I'm John Worsfold, Cloud Solution Architect, and today I'll be joined with Jazz. Jazz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, so my name's Jazz. I'm a program manager and I work within the Azure AD B2C product team.
Brilliant. So today you're going to walk us through what Azure B2C is and how it's different to Azure Active Directory, which is something we've mentioned on a number of these sessions previously.
Exactly. But let's start first with what businesses' ultimate goals actually are, and that is to connect with their customers. They want to do that securely, and they want to extract data from their consumers so that they can better their business and connect with their customers in a more successful manner. A couple of examples is if you have an application that's doing well, you want to understand why users are specifically using that application more than maybe another application. So using a central identity store, you can extract insights from this data to make yourself more successful.
So this is sort of giving, not only is it providing an identity, it's giving some value add, is it, as well then?
Exactly. So not only will you gain data about your entire customer base, but you can understand where particular customers are coming from, for example, a geography. You can target specific promotional data to your customers based off their usage. And that's all because all of your identities are in a single identity store.
Okay. So I guess linked to that, would this help with things like GDPR? Would this be a tool that would help with that?
Yes, exactly. So your identities being in a single store would help with you managing your identity data. So that could be, for example, if a customer asks to delete their account, you'll be able to remove their account from a single place and know that you are compliant with GDPR.
Oh, that'll be really useful. So I guess for me, and hope maybe the audience as well, one of the things that I get a bit stuck on is that identity landscape. So obviously we're all used to the whole multiple identities and moving to a world with single identities, and Azure Active Directory is seen as a big step towards that and allowing other cloud services. So I guess, and hopefully you'll cover this, how does B2C differ from Azure Active Directory?
So there's a couple of differences. The first thing is B2C is more in tune for you as a business providing a service that customers can consume, whereas Azure AD is more about collaboration with your partners or other businesses. For example, they might want to consume SharePoint with you, whereas with B2C, you wouldn't really have a personal relationship with this customer. You just know that they are actually consuming your service to take advantage of it.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. So this is more of a replacement for, say, using SQL or lightweight directory services or any sort of third-party sort of database to hold your identities in. Because I know certainly a lot of the customers I've worked with in the past have used Microsoft SQL for the application, but also they store their identities in there for that application. So this would be a replacement for that, would it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, using SQL and any sort of on-prem or self-rolled authentication platform can come with some problems because you have to manage the security and the compliance of that system. And in large organizations, we find that businesses end up having multiple identity stores scattered throughout the business for each kind of application that they've developed. But here, B2C would be a platform that's backed by the technology that's securing our enterprise authentication. So that would be Azure AD. So that provides a secure platform to do authentication and allows a path for all of those segregated identity stores to come into a central store.
Great. So this is actually not only we're not having to store them so much. I take it also that we're having to do less management. We're not having to necessarily create those accounts and manage passwords or changes to surname or email address, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. The platform itself allows users to edit their profile or sign up or sign in. And if they use a social identity provider like we're looking at here, they will be managing their own credentials with that identity provider, be it Facebook or Google or LinkedIn. That's how that would work.
Great.
So like I'm showing here, users can log in with any sort of identity that they bring, and that can be Facebook or Twitter, or even a government ID, or also an Azure AD identity, so any sort of enterprise ID as well. Any identity provider is supported by B2C. On the other side, we have the business who has their own line of business applications or analytics or automation that's happening against their application and the user data. And in the middle, we have Azure AD B2C, which provides the secure authentication platform for your consumers. It provides a fully customizable sign-in, sign-up experience. You can brand that to look exactly like your application's layout. And we can capture custom data to represent that user in your directory. That could be, for example, if you're a shoe company, you could understand what shoe sizes your customers are, and something like that would help understand how to manage your supply chain. So this helps not only your consumers and their experience, but also helps you from a business perspective in terms of managing identities and your workflows.
Great. And I take it's platform agnostic. It'll work on all the mobile apps and various different browsers.
That's right. You can use this across all platforms. We provide various tools so that you can build applications using our platform against any sort of device or computer, including mobile.
So I guess one question, that instantly springs to my mind, especially when we talk about social identities like Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., is if I'm building an application and I'm using Azure B2C as my identity, how do I stop people from signing up? Because perhaps my application isn't a retail-facing application. It's an application that I want only certain people to be able to access.
So we have a couple of ways of doing this, one from an identity perspective, and another side would be the developer perspective. The identity perspective would be more to do with, for example, which domain the user comes from. So maybe you only want users from a specific identity provider to log in. However, if you want more fine-grained control at a user level, so for example, specific emails or specific groups, then there's a combination of identity and developer work that would be needed. You would need to assign your users to groups and do app-side authorization, whereby you obtain the groups and you determine if that user will or will not have access to your application.
So that could have an authorization or an approval process, can it?
Yeah, you could build an approval process around this. And the other thing you could do is actually customize the policy so that it understands which groups are required or which groups should have access and prevent a user from gaining access to your application. So there is a level of authorization built in.
That sounds great, and you touched on something that's close to my heart, which is obviously security. Can you do things like extra security, like multi-factor authentication? Does the platform support that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something you can configure in the portal, and we'll have a look at that later in this demo. We can configure MFA for all users by default, and we can also do custom work, which would allow MFA for specific users or specific factors taken into account. So let's move on. Yep. Let's move on to some scenarios here that work with Azure AD B2C. So a typical application, so a grocery application, B2C would let you access the application via mobile or browser. Mobile or browser, and you can configure which identity providers you want. So in this case, maybe just Facebook. So that's possible to do. And then on the other side, you may have a business who wants to work with you. So for example, a reseller, and this reseller has Azure AD accounts already. That can actually be integrated with B2C. So these resellers can log in with their corporate credentials and be managed from your business. And all of this data that you may collect when users sign up, for example, can be used to send targeted promotional material, similar to how we have in supermarkets today and loyalty cards. But this would be the digital version of that.
So a question I've got there then is, so what you're saying is you could pull data potentially from, let's say, my Facebook identity. For example, my hometown, it says, where I live, you can pull that data. What if I don't want to give you that permission? Does it have that option? And if so, how does that work?
Yeah, that's true. So although you can request for Facebook to provide this information, the user can always decline to send that information through to B2C. But in that case, we can configure B2C to re-request that information within its own environment, such that the user doesn't complete their registration until they've provided that specific data. And that's down to if you require that data as a business or if it's optional.
Okay, that sounds great. It certainly helps with the GDPR angle there.
Exactly.
I suppose just the awkward question, and probably unrealistic nowadays, is what if in that scenario I don't have a Facebook identity? I don't use Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever the two options you might have offered in that application. Does that mean it won't work at all, or is there an option there?
No, not at all. So of course we have an option here. So usually a consumer-facing service will always give an option for that user to create a new account. So if they do not want to link their Facebook, or maybe they don't have a social identity provider, then they always have the option of creating an account with that B2C environment and logging in with that account.
Brilliant. And I guess my follow-on question there is how does B2C handle, or can it handle, the situation where I've used Facebook, for example, I've signed up to your application, I'm actively using it, but then I've decided I want to come off Facebook?
Yeah, so we understand from the email perspective as to whether you've logged in previously and have an account. And so even if you logged in with Facebook and then logged in with Google, we'll understand that those are the same identities. And it's the same as if you created an account with that B2C environment initially and then logged in with Facebook, we would understand and be able to link those accounts together.
Great, so you can literally
You don't have to do anything. Yeah.
Brilliant, so you can swap identity providers after signing up really simply then. Oh, that's good. So I guess, and this is one thing that I've had a number of conversations with people over the last couple of months, is that you can have that mix, that it's, it doesn't just have to be consumer IDs. You can also use a partner's or a customer's Azure Active Directory or Office 365 tenant Active Directory to authenticate.
That's right. So we integrate with any protocol compliant identity provider. So one of them would be Azure AD. So if you do want to have corporate logons or provide slightly different experience to your employees to access your application, you can do that by allowing them to log in with their Office 365 account or wherever they may be. Potentially this business has their own identity provider, and you could integrate with that as well.
Brilliant. Sounds really good.
So I'll go on with the football fan app, and it's pretty similar to what I've just discussed about the grocery app. But the main thing to understand here is that the users who are consuming these applications generally aren't working with you on a project or building something with you. They're more likely to be consuming your services, and they're generally just your customer. You wouldn't have a working relationship with them. Okay, so I'll go on to a couple of scenarios where B2C doesn't really fit, just to give an idea of the differences. So an internal vacation booking tool, it sounds obvious, but only your employees are consuming the application. It doesn't need to be provided to the open world. And your employees already have Office 365 accounts, or maybe they're already using some sort of on-prem accounts. So here we don't need B2C. If they have Office 365, you would continue integrating this application with Azure AD. And on top of that, you may have conditional access controls in Azure AD, which limit the access to your application, and that could be based off where the user's coming from or the device that they're on. And just to add here, it's generally more suited for you to be using Azure AD when your application is going to be consuming Office 365 APIs or Office 365 applications. They may use a personal account, and you may want to collaborate with other Azure AD directories or organizations, and you would invite those users to your Azure AD to continue collaborating with you, rather than having B2C where the user would just be consuming your application, but not technically working with you on anything.
Okay, so is that the difference between B2C and B2B then?
That's right. Technically, B2B was a previous product, but generally B2B we're considering as Azure AD now, not what we used to think as the B2B invitations, but those are covered within Azure AD as inviting users now. Okay. So we'll just move on to the demo at this stage. So we're going to go through a couple of things. How to create your Azure AD B2C directory. It's free. We provide up to 50,000 authentications for free. We'll show you how to build a sign up and sign in experience and how to use the password reset pages. And we'll also show you how you can integrate an OpenID Connect provider, or at least how that looks like within Azure AD B2C. So let me switch. So I've just gone to portal.azure.com and I'm logged in with my Office 365 account, which is linked to a Azure subscription. And I'm just going to hit, well, I've just hit create resource and I can search B2C. And you'll see it comes up with Azure Active Directory B2C. So I hit create and I want to create a new tenant. So we give it a name. And it will just check it's available. I can select where I want my directory to be based. So if I choose in a European country, it will actually be based in Europe. So we do have data residency laws in place here. So I will choose London. Just click create. So once the directory is being created, and this may take a minute, we will then just link it to our Azure subscription, which I'll show you how to do.
So while we're just waiting for that, one of the things that I've sort of come across with B2C and some of the conversations I've had is where does the skill set lie? So traditionally Active Directory and to an extent Azure Active Directory always sort of sat with the infrastructure, the identity, the security guys. But my understanding is B2C isn't quite as clear cut as that some of it needs to be developer as well. Is that true?
Yeah, that would be right. I would think a large proportion of the authentication configuration in the Azure portal that you may do to create your policies and journeys for sign in and sign up, that would be with the identity skilled folks. And the other side of that would be the authorization side, which may happen on the app side. So for example, understanding which groups are allowed access and so forth. And there will be a slight development area to come into that as well. And the other thing is when you're looking to customize your login pages, there is a development side there as well of HTML and CSS.
So it really needs to be a joint effort then between the identity guys in the organization and the whoever's building the application.
Yeah, that's right. I'm about to cut it because I can't find this thing, so all right, here we go.
So you just mentioned about the groups there again, and another question that I often get asked around this is about role-based access and how do we set that up? Based on what you said there, then I'm assuming that would be built within the application, so you could leverage groups in B2C and Active Directory, but it would be the application that would leverage those and say what they can and can't do within the application. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So the group claims can be returned in the token to the application, and then the application would need to do authorization within the code to determine if the user does or doesn't have access, and that will be down to the developer to come up with some sort of rules as to who should and shouldn't have access. So I'm just going to link this to my subscription. I need to find this somewhere. So once the directory has been created, we can actually just click link to an existing Azure B2C to my Azure subscription. And this should find the Azure tenant that you've just created. We can pop it into an existing resource group or a new one. So I'll just create a new one. And we can place that in a specific region. Okay, so now it's been connected to an Azure subscription, we can actually use the directory. And just let that complete. Okay, so what we need to do now is click the switch directory button and hit, give this a refresh. Okay, and hit Azure Citadel, which is the new directory we've just created. Okay, so what we need to do now is go to the B2C blade itself. So I can hit Azure AD B2C. And now we have access to your B2C directory where we can actually start building our identity experience. So the first thing we can do is create a policy. So I've just gone into sign up or sign in policies and added a policy. And I'll just call this Citadel. We can select which identity providers we want. So I've only got email sign up here, but I'll show you guys how to add Facebook and Google. So I'll just click OK. We can add specific sign up attributes that we want the user to provide upon sign up. I won't select anything here, and we can also provide specific custom claims or extra claims that we want to provide in the token to the application.
So if I wanted to get something from Facebook, let's say hometown, is that an application claim or is that a sign up attribute?
Okay, so it wouldn't be a sign up attribute in this scenario. What you would need to do if you wanted that from Facebook is to select that in when you register your application on Facebook side. You would ask that you want hometown to be a delivered claim, and then you would add it as an application claim, so that would be delivered in the token to your application. Okay.
Brilliant, thanks.
So here we have the multi-factor authentication option. Of course, we can just turn that on or off, and that will be for all users at this point. And we have page UI customization, whereby you can go in and provide a HTML template from any hosting provider that you like, and we will use that to customize the login pages for you. So I won't do any of that here. I'll just create a basic policy. So before I run this policy, we need to do a couple other things. you always need to register an application. So this will represent the application that you're developing. So we'll call this Azure Citadel. And I want it to be a web app. So for example, a .NET MVC application. I wouldn't need an implicit flow here. I set the reply URL to where I want my tokens to go. In this case, I want them to go to jwt.ms, which is a token parser that we can use to look at the token. So I'm going to hit create. Okay, and the next thing I can do is show you guys how to add, for example, Facebook. So right now we've just got email. We haven't got any social identity providers, and we haven't got any custom identity providers either. So obviously, social identity providers refers to Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and so forth. And custom identity providers refers to adding an OpenID Connect compliant identity provider. So that could be a way that you can add Azure AD as an identity provider. So let me click add, and just call this Facebook. And we already have some built-in providers, so I will choose Facebook and click OK. So I would need to set this up, and this is where I was mentioning about where you need to register an application within Facebook. So you would add client ID and client secret. I'm going to try and put something in. Okay, so once we've done that, this is our overall configuration. So now we have Facebook as an identity provider. I can just add that to my sign-in policy. So that hasn't added it to every policy. I might want one policy per application. So for example, this policy doesn't have Facebook yet. So I click it again and hit edit. And I select identity providers, and now we should see Facebook here. Try that again.
So in this scenario, then, as your application grows, you might want to add additional identity providers, or you know, the next Facebook, you know, becomes a global hit, and you need to add that to your application. It's simply just going in here and adding it as another identity provider.
That's right, and just on top of that, you can add that per application or per policy. You may have a policy that's shared between multiple applications. That's fine. But of course, it's added on a policy level. So you may have some applications that you may not want to have Facebook on. So therefore, you don't need to add that on that policy. So I've just added Facebook and hit save. So once I click my policy here, we provide a way for you guys to test your policy as well, to see what it will look like without having to go into Visual Studio and set up an application. So here we provide what we call a run now endpoint, and you can run that now and it will log us in. So let me hit that. And so this is what your page currently looks like. So you can see I've got the Facebook social identity provider. I won't click that because that's not configured, but if that was configured, that would log me in with my currently signed on Facebook account. And of course, it allows me to sign up or sign in with an existing account. So if I don't have an account, I can sign up now.
Right, and this page is what you can fully customize, because obviously it looks very Microsoft branded.
Yeah, so all of these pages are fully customizable, and right now with the URL as well, we support you to use what we call B2C login.com. So you can have, for example, name.b2clogin.com that will be representing your directory and your login endpoints. So here I would enter an email address and get a verification code and provide my details to create an account. But I've already got an account, so I'll just hit cancel. So I didn't get access. The user's actually canceled. So if I run this again, in fact, I don't have an account in this tenant, so let me sign up. So I'll pop in my email. And I have to send a verification code. That's something you can change as well. It's not required to have a code, so let me just wait for that email.
But typically most applications do, don't they? They send you an email that you have to click on a link, etc.
for a security perspective, you would want to understand the user does have access to this inbox. So I'll just hit verify and click create. Oh, okay.
Can you define password complexity?
Yes, we can. So we have built-in options to determine what your password should look like in terms of password strength. So we have a couple of options. In fact, let me just find those. So where's it now? So let me go into the policy and we can edit the policy. And you can see here that we've got a password complexity window, and it allows you to have a couple of different settings. So minimum here is just 8 characters and a max length, but that can be any characters, and then we've got various others. So 8 characters, different character classes, and then you can set your own as well. So a different set of groups in terms of the types of characters required and the lengths.
Brilliant.
Okay, so let me close that. So that shows the login. I will also show a password reset. So let me create a password reset policy. So we hit add. Set. Okay. And I hit preset password.
So obviously you can't select Facebook because you don't control that identity store.
Yeah, so of course if the user's forgotten their Facebook password, they would go there. But generally most users are already logged in with their social identity provider, so it's very unlikely. And so let me just hit create. So once again I can test this policy. It's already set up with the application that I created previously and my reply URL. And if I hit run now, I will provide my email and send a code. And once I enter this code, it will allow me to change my password. So this takes all the overhead away of an administrator having to be called to reset a password. Rather, the user can manage this themselves.
Yeah, or actually building a password reset. So I know organizations that have used things like SQL to store their identities and have had to build, in effect, that sort of application to just manage password resets where literally within a few clicks you've built it.
Yeah, exactly, and it's all secured by the same system as our enterprise grade platform, Azure AD. And I'll come up with the password now. And there we go. So in this case, I've successfully managed to get an authorization code for this application. Okay, so that shows a couple of things that we can do with B2C. The other thing I wanted to show was how you could use, or how it would look like if you had configured an identity provider, a custom identity provider. So if I hit add, I just put Azure AD, and I choose custom identity provider OpenID Connect, which Azure AD is. I would need to do some setup here to understand where the tokens and so forth should be generated from and validated from. And I would need B2C to understand how to map the token claims that come back from this identity provider to what B2C understands. Once you do that, you'll end up with something that looks like this. And I'll just open this in a private window. So I've already configured Azure AD as the identity provider here, and that's just called OIDC. So you can see it's actually taken me to my Azure AD page where I'll use my account, my Office 365 account, to log in. And there we go, we've authenticated and we've got an ID token. So this would be the scenario where we spoke about the grocery application, whereby maybe I'm a reseller and I have special access to your grocery backend to purchase in large quantities, for example, and the application would understand that I am a reseller from a couple of things, but one thing could be the identity provider being used. So all the resellers would be using if they're using a specific identity provider or their own identity provider, your application would understand that this identity provider is actually a reseller. So this account and their experience should be different to a normal consumer's experience. Okay. So I think that overall gives a good balanced overview on Azure AD B2C and the differences against Azure AD, how to set up your sign in and sign up policies, and you can see it's really easy to use. So we urge you guys to go and get started and try this out.
And you mentioned it's free. Is that free completely, or is there like a tiered model where you get so much free of charge?
So yeah, it's a tiered model. So you would have 50,000 authentications free per month. So for anyone developing or trying to get started with B2C, they won't incur any charges against their Azure subscription.
Brilliant. That's great. So there's no excuse not to give it a go. And
exactly.
From what I can tell, there aren't. But are there any limitations, or could you literally use this with any application that's obviously suitable?
That's right. So any iOS application, Android application, if you have .NET application or a single page JavaScript application, all of these would be able to integrate with Azure AD B2C, and we provide libraries for each type of application so that you can get up and running pretty quickly.
And where would people find those libraries?
Right. So there's a Azure AD B2C GitHub page. We can put the link here somewhere, and that has access to some of the sample applications and the libraries that are referenced in those applications.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much, Jazz. That was a really useful session, and certainly I got quite a bit of good, useful information on how it is different. So thank you. Once again, was this session useful? Let us know your comments, your thoughts, questions, and by all means, let us know what you'd like to see on the next session. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.